Ada handphone yang bisa kepingin untuk hitung waktu.
Hitung waktu. Nih, ada di time cap.
Iya nih, masih bawa suasana tiba-tiba tak segampang.
Dia tahu lagi lagu.
Hah?
Dia tahu lagi lagu.
Tiba-tiba kayak
Kenapa dari angle-nya.
Oh, pakai karena tadi
oh iya.
Di sini saya tahu.
Dari samping aja sih. Just put it anywhere.
Di sini, di depannya di kabar.
oh iya betul.
Itu kursi. Oh. Sekarang kita tolong kursi.
Kemana kak?
Ke depan sini.
Kursi yang kita.
Nah, taruh di situ.
Sini.
Ya.
Salam sekalian dulu.
Nah, mana itu tadi HP? Ya, betul sekali.
Sudah?
Iya, kami saya.
We regret that our soldiers should be sacrificed for the selfish interests of the government engaged in unnecessary war. We regret that the doctors are forced to leave their wives, their husband, their children to treat patients infected with COVID while risking their lives. Those people are coerced into putting their lives at risk and are deceived into thinking that they are heroes because they are thought to have sacrificed their lives. Hence, we propose that this House would oppose the narrative of sacrifice as a description of the work performed by essential workers during the crisis. Two main contention from opening government: why the narrative of sacrifice is unjust, and secondly, why our alternative is better. My second speaker will explain further why we think that our side is much better to not go with this particular narrative. But before I get into them, several important clarification. Number one, essential workers. We must recognize that this essential workforce is divided into segments. To begin with, there are several jobs that are essential by nature. For example, doctors, nurses. However, during crisis, the spectrum shifted, with several jobs that were not previously considered essential becoming so for a variety of reasons. For example, a supermarket employee, they are forced to go to work to serve the customers during pandemics, otherwise the shop would operate, or any job that requires the worker to leave their home. So I think this kind of characterization that we must engage in today's debate. Secondly, our alternative is very simple. We suggested that instead of the narrative of sacrifice, the narrative of coercion is better suited to represent the true motivation of why these people are on the battlefield during the war, or why they continue to work in a supermarket despite the fact that the risk of COVID is extremely high. The narrative of coercion is better suited because we think that they continue to work in the supermarket despite the fact that they know that this is very dangerous. So it is not because of their self-transcendence or the belief that they can climb moral high ground, but because they have no other option or alternative. If not, then who will step up and take up the responsibility? Therefore, we think that this is the characterization that all teams in this debate need to engage to, ladies and gentlemen. But before getting to my point, any why? No, my first point, why the narrative of sacrifice is unjust. Firstly, let me make this very simple for all the teams. Narrative of sacrifice means that you have agreed to give up all of your rights in order to help someone in your country or any reason for that. The issue with a crisis is that you are not prepared for it. You do not consent to it. This is completely unacceptable to us. We have two scenarios to support our claims. First scenario, for example, doctors. Doctors typically attend medical school for at least 5 years. When you pursue becoming a doctor in a hospital, you are led to believe that you will be safe as long as you follow the protocols. Thus, you assume that this job as a doctor is something you want to pursue because there's no harm at all. But the problem with the crisis is that you are never to prepare or to face a pandemic. For example, because you never face a condition in your studies, like your seniors or your lecturers never tell you about it. So when you are aspiring to be a doctor, you never know that there is a possibility that you will die or you need to be a frontliner during the cases of pandemic or during the COVID, ladies and gentlemen. And I think that in that particular sense, that you don't know that there is a condition that you are required to work more than your normal hours, and so on. So this implies that there are situations in which you are expected and forced to perform a series of tasks that you're never taught to do in medical school. For example, in the second scenario, individuals who apply to become a soldiers, they are told that, for example, during a war, if you want to give up, you can. But this is not something that happened in ideal condition, right? Because that can only happen in a situation where the war is just. But when the war is not just, which is always the case, even if you claim to be a surrender, you will still be attacked by your enemy and you could die. And these soldiers never agreed to this. So what is the conclusion? During a crisis, these people are forced to function beyond their normal situation or fulfill their roles, even going above and beyond the call of duty. They are not acting benevolently, nor do they believe this is morally aligned with their idealism. They are pushed and pressured by the government and the society to sacrifice their life for the egoistic desires of the stakeholders. We believe this is evil, the narrative is extremely dangerous, particularly for those essential workers. Furthermore, as we stated in our setup, there is a necessary shift in the definition of essential workers. So some workers, they become essential workers because of the situation. For example, like those who are working as a cashier, they used to only bag groceries. Now they have to be a frontliner in the time of crisis. The reason they still want to go to work during a crisis, not because they want to become a hero, but there is a reason of economic desperation. Therefore, they need to go there. So even if, ladies and gentlemen, there are individuals who genuinely sacrifice, for example, a doctor, who always know that their job is full of risk, pandemic, etc., they will be tired anyway. They will undoubtedly face a shift in their motivation. Notice that the situation during a crisis is highly unpredictable, emotionally and physically taxing, and you will be tired regardless. So the reason they still go to work in the end is because they are coerced. They must always find a way to survive in the midst of crisis. Therefore, we think that all the scenario and all the explanation has given to you has proven to you why we think that this is not a sacrifice but a coercion. Let's get into my second point. It's about why our alternative is better. But before that, any POI? No. Okay, so what will happen in the opposing side is that when these essential workers are tired because of their job, when they want to quit because of an unaccepted condition of crisis, society's response will be, okay, that's okay, don't give up because you sacrificed for your country, you are doing this for an afterlife, grace. I think what happened, ladies and gentlemen, that even though you're getting this particular narrative, there's no opt-out mechanism for these workers. Therefore, regardless of situation, you need to be a frontliner. Even if they ultimately decide to quit their job, they will be perceived by the society as someone weak, lazy, selfish, or any bad word that you can throw out to them, ladies and gentlemen, which I think is extremely harmful for these individuals, because I think that what happened is that they will be perceived as someone who is not loyal to the country, ladies and gentlemen. In contrast, when the narrative is they are coerced, people believe that these workers still go to work because they have family with daily needs that they must meet, or they have economic circumstances that force them to continue working. This means that society can empathize and sympathize with these essential workers who have the ability to collectivize and protest against this unfair imposition to these essential workers. Society will intend to do so in order to assist them in escaping from these extremely difficult circumstances, such as being forced to work long hours or being deployed for extremely violent war. So whatever their motivation, society will see these vital workers or essential workers as the victims of the situation, not because they want to do so, gentlemen. For those two reasons, we proud to propose.
Prime Minister, two responses from Prime Minister. First is about they said about it will be egoistic desire if we always do sacrifice in as a workers during a crisis. But in our world, it will not be happen because what we want to achieve here is how we can make the feeling of the importance of the obligation as the worker, and then because in our life it's important thing that must be gotten by every worker in every work. And then the second response is about they say it will be harmful because they may still be selfish and so on and so forth. But it will in our world it will not be happen because it will increase their sympathy, because maybe for example they work as doctor, as the nurses and so on and so forth. They will always meet with patient meet a patient. It will increase their sympathy because they humanity and so on and so forth. And as the leader of opposition, I will bring to before I come with my argument, let's see here about essential workers, where we know that essential workers means people who work in social services. They for example like doctor, nurses, and so on and so forth. And then why as the leader of opposition we think that it's very important to workers to get sacrificed in their work life, because when this narrative exists, it will encourage the worker to normalize the sacrifice itself, because the purpose to tackle the crisis will be achieved when the crisis come in the world and so on and so forth. For example, during COVID-19, nurses just work from 8 until 5 hours, and then in the night they will shift or replace. But during crisis, or if crisis happen, they must still little longer. So using this narrative, using the narrative of sacrifice will will be important. The crisis itself exists. And then as the leader of opposition, I will bring two arguments tonight. First is about why sacrifice is important thing, especially for the workers itself, and the second is why it will give good inspiration for society. Alright, my arguments come up with first why sacrifice will be very important for the workers. First, we know that sacrifice is a form of commitment to the greater good. To the greater job. Because we know that they have known about their work. And then they understand their job. For example, they decided to be a doctor. They decided to be a fire doctor, and then it will be something like as a commitment of their job. And then the second reason is we know that nowadays it's very difficult for workers to get validation, right? Although they work for a long time, for hours by hours, but it will sometimes, for example, their boss still don't give validation. Still don't give validation to them. So and then nowadays we know that if you work well, it means that you do a sacrifice. So if people give sacrifice in their job, this worker of course will give the validation, and then it will also motivate their friends to also give sacrifice, because it's important in the work world. And then the second argument is about why it will give good inspiration for society, because we know that because we know that if the worker can give a sacrifice, it will motivate people to do that, and then it will also give a good opinion for society itself that these people can. I mean it's important to do a sacrifice in the work as the to motivate people and so on and so forth. I think that's all. Thank you.
Yang kedua, ya, untuk motivasi bangsa saya kepada masyarakat. Orang modern yang peduli.
Panels, all their concern is about how people will do their job accordingly. That's the bare minimum of all workers should be, right? So without war, without crisis, and without conflict, people are just doing their job as their bare minimum, and that's a requirement. So their argument, focusing on that, shouldn't be found in this debate. But here's the thing, the focus in this debate is that we should realize in both work, these like work and occupation are always exist, right? You cannot eradicate the occupation, you cannot eradicate the conflict, you cannot eradicate the crisis. It is always happen and it is inevitable. The problem is two things. First, there is neglections to the real issues that is happening, and the government seems don't see the actual things that the issues happen. Second, there are these normalizations to the unfair treatment to workers that is continuously being normalized because of this narrative, and we want to challenge that. It is so important for the whole teams to recognize this, right? So, what Akbar already told you. First, they are already claiming that the narrative is unjust by in and of itself. Second of all, they are already providing alternative. But in our side of the house, I will explain to you about first why the narrative makes the government neglect the responsibility to address the elephant in the room. Second, this narrative harm the most vulnerable identity, which we never explain and discuss in this debate. I will bring this into a new contribution. You should come there. So, my first argument. Our thought to you about opposing this narrative is crucial to find the root of the problem and asking for their to fair treatment and remunerations. And in a very simple term, we want a systemic change inside the government and how to deal with the situations, right? Akbar already told you about how the expectations are fundamental to society, but I'm going to deliver the debate into also discussing how government react to this and this narrative worsening the situations and how in our alternative we're going to make the situation better, right? Several issues. First issue is government failure to identify the problems. During crisis, government actually can do things to prevent casualties, right? So they should the reason why principally it's justified because government should doing the job as the one that trusted by the society to save the society, right? So let me make this into example. In COVID, lockdown should down sooner. For example, it shouldn't be waiting until many or millions of people die on the ground. But even if during lockdown, government can ensure food and security and not neglect all societies, right? Government also shouldn't recklessly send people to war because there are still diplomatic options always exist. Just warfare in principle is always exist. So basically the government neglect all those things because of this normalization of narrative, right? Instead, also, they are not doing it and makes people or society should take the responsibility to solve the problem simply because the narrative told us that these are their occupations, right? This narrative makes government comfortable to always burdening this responsibility to the worker and not addressing the elephant in the room. For example, COVID is about prevention, vaccine, and also tracking for those who got the disease, right? But government does not address this. Government use this narrative to make sure that this worker or health worker needs to be appraised because they are sacrificing their life to the country. Make us forget that the actual problematic issues that we need to address is the government failure to prevent this in the first place. Jokowi failed to, let's say, make a policies, for example, to make sure that we are not getting COVID like this worse in 2 years ago, right? So, because of this narrative, government does that. But what happened in our work? In our work, opposing it means, first, if there is a crisis, government should be always at fault. So if we are opposing this, our focus not like burdening the person who's going to counter the issues on the ground, but we also try to reach the government first and asking what is happening towards the prevention of war, for example, towards the treatment of COVID and how the policies making is going to work. And second, we should also really I cannot read we should also like really make sure that these particular people are not romanticizing towards the effort and etc. Right? But second point, even if the government can identify this problem and this is the issues like our best case scenario exists, right? But here's the thing. In their side, they should also explain why this narrative give better and fair treatment to the worker in the ground. But the reason I am trying to explain to you this, because in society or in status quo, when you are trying to romanticize these issues and also burdening it towards the health worker and etc. to solve COVID, their treatment is simply their rights are simply neglected because they are claimed to be sacrificed for the country's good or for the country's needs. This is what are very harmful from this narrative, right? This narrative is the normalization of the poor treatment.
Notice that under your side of the house, these kinds of people are also going to be thrown in dangerous ways because they need this work to basically afford living for themselves. How is it going to be better under your side?
In a very ideal situation, government should always cater to society in all conditions, right?
Here.
So just because there war happened, just because there COVID happened, it doesn't justify for the government to like throwing their people to death, right? Inside of COVID. This is also related to my argument. I'm going to explain to you the ideal situation in our world. If you are going to like normalize their effort to, let's say, encountering COVID issues, you should also provide them with the better treatment, not also like neglect them just because this narrative exists. What I'm trying to say, in COVID, many people are not provided by PPE, personal protective equipment, right? For example, many people are going to war without adequate military intelligence, for example, military skill. So they are just living, throwing their life easily to that, for example, just because the narrative is also exist. In our world, in worst case scenario, the government cannot identify the issues. We are trying to force the government with opposing this narrative and simply saying they are not just sacrificing their life. The government is continuously killing these people on the ground, thus you should equip them better. This is what happened in our side of the house, right? So, my second argument, I'm talking about opposing this narrative means fight for the most vulnerable identity. So, I'm going to talk to you, I'm going to tell you very quick. Minority identity in crisis, they are given double burden. Not only they have to survive the crisis, they also should like surviving their identity as a minority to be also not persecuted, for example, and not giving and shifting the blame for the majority, right? For example, like COVID, Chinese American also tend to be like blamed for the COVID exists, right? And women, when times of like crisis, they should be doing proper job. This happened because in their narrative, they are fetishizing, like they are basically hate the identity, but when they are contributing, they are fetishizing their contribution as simply because they are claiming to be so special, and their worth is worth to be sacrificed because they are trying to blend in with the majority. This is very problematic. And in our alternative, we have this. Ya sudah, thank you. Habis ternyata bagusnya lagi limpeknya. Maaf ya.
Aku prediksi akan
Ini kalau kes belum bisa dibawa. Hah? Ini kalau kes lebih banyak mau dibawa. Kalau kes belum. Kan kayak tapi dari situ bawa. Iya, cocok.
Atan di mana? Leci ya?
Iya, leci itu. Yang ujung paling ya itu tuh. Mana yang ekstra topping? Ada ekstra.
saja Pak.
expose the narrative of sacrifice as a description of the worker performed by essential worker during a crisis, we are going to start the debate with the clarification that this debate is about how we are going to describe the job of essential worker, example, medical workers, farmer labor, and other workers during this pandemic. We consider that essential worker means the crisis come in so many forms. There are workers who are wholeheartedly contribute on the solvency of the pandemic, and there are some workers who do their work because they are concerned by their circumstances. Example, financial problem. They have to feed their children, or they happen to work on essential sector that should run at least the pandemic, and they don't have any option to opt out from the contract. But the question is, in this debate, how we are going to motivate them to still work at least this pandemic. My first argument, which side of the house is going to give more motivation to the worker? First, pressure is mutually exclusive in this debate. They can get away from the fact that workers shall sacrifice themselves at least this pandemic in both sides, with or without the narrative. Such pressure is already exists. Medical workers should add a lot of working hours aside from their usual work, aside from the fact that they are not paid well. They leave their children for work. They experience constant anxiety because they are afraid they will be infected. But on the next point, this narrative will rather portray them in a humanoid way. We will portray them as a human being who have limitation. Rather, we are going to portray them as a hero who sacrificed themselves to sustain the country. It is their side of the house. We are going to make them see as a machine. They do it for the sake of their daddies. They will most likely to pressurize even more. But how exactly do we bring motivation to them? The narrative of you are hero will indeed warm their heart, assuming that they are conflicting with themselves mentally. This narrative will make them make peace upon themselves that they are going something greater than themselves for the sake of the well-being of the society. This is important for those concerned workers who constantly battling with themselves. But on the B point, media portrayal will create an image that they are working 24/7. Now all small contribution would be seen as a sacrifice. So thank you. This will send the narrative to the society to appreciate them and give the worker better coping mechanism. In the worst case, we concede that the appreciation will not be significant. It might be small thing like saying thank you to supermarket workers, but at least it helps them go through the painful days and help them to make peace with themselves. Comparatively in government, all the burden will be on the worker. The fact that they want to portray it as their duties, if they are not doing enough, they will be demonized. This is already growing in society. In status quo, people blame medical workers for being inability to cope with the pandemic. But on my second argument, we are going to create collective sacrifice by the society. Notice that this crisis or pandemic can only be solved if everyone gives some level of sacrifice to at least stay at home. But the reason why the society in status quo are not willing to sacrifice are, the first, they are egoist in nature. They feel like they are the only one who suffer in this crisis. Second, there are a lot of hoax and misguiding information in the media.
On that point.
And the third is they simply can comprehend the rigid scientific information for the crisis. Under our side, we are going to incentivize the society, also sacrifice how in media portrayal that the worker is sacrificing themselves for the sake of the battlement for the situation will not trap them to extent where they are feel guilty to go out. We also think that if there a glorification to work collectively on achieving some ideas, the society will be more incentivized to follow the rules because now they feel like everyone is sacrificing themselves. But the second point, the functional documentation of how they serve the pandemic case in the hospital and how the medical worker work hard will neutralize in the misguiding information because now it's evident that coronavirus does exist. But on my third point, because of some people can understand the information, is it better to use the emotional tool because is it easier to empathize them to comprehend the scientific research? Those they will be more incentivized to support them. And now, how the manifestation looks like? A, they will at least stay at home. Second, they will donate more on supporting the unpaid worker or to help the most vulnerable group in society. And third, the huge media coverage and social pressure will put the blame on government to fix the system. Like will make them more fun to pay them or give them more protection in their workplace, because we notice that jobs like supermarket worker and blue-collar labor get less protection on comparison to medical worker. Comparatively in government, it is the worker who are going to be blamed because they are not doing their job as well. Even if in the worst case, some people will say be denial and unauthentic. First, this will be even worse in government because they will not have any mechanism to chatter them, and if they are stupid, they would change anyway. On my second point, at least under our side, there will be a lot of check and balances inside the society to shame these people if they go out. That's
Point.
all. Protocols.
Closing, kalian mau mulai POI atau dari opening pasti ada POI?
Harus ada POI dari harus
Antara kalau kalian tidak nge-POI each other by 5 saya berani.
forced POI min itu closing. Forced acceptance.
Jadi harus diterima.
Wajib. Kalau udah diterima tahu ya?
Ini dia yang kita ini yang makanan tentu.
Hah?
Bisa pendengar nih kalau di sini.
Iya, yang mana punya aku?
Oh ya normal ya? Gak tambah-tambahin. Ya itu. Enak itu, orangnya punya pro, sama kau aja. Yang minyak ada juga sih itu. Banyak.
Two main several engagement course. Number one, they're talking about it will be give a motivation for this like essential worker. But I didn't know because why? Number one, I think the reaction time from the society it's different because the society will think that like it's your obligation as an essential worker to do this kind of thing. So that's why I think that if outside like it will be a bit society will respect you, for example, because you are not sacrifice anything, but it never happen at the house because to begin with the society will also react like it is your obligation. So in your side of the house, I think I think that the society, the process of blaming more likely happen under yourself at the house because sometimes if you don't do something well, the society will question you why you are not doing this kind of why you are not doing this thing good. Because I think the society will blame you, ladies and gentlemen. So, I think tidak bisa berpikir kan?
Ya kalian yang mati kan sekarang.
Iya.
Bisa gitu.
Ayo nggak bisa.
Bisa.
Lagi. Ayo nervous banget kagak.
Kenapa nih?
Gara-gara mau Indomie itu.
Bukan juga sekarang Indomie bukan.
Selesai masa ya nak?
Satu bench sedikit.
Kak di nasional lebih ngeri itu nah.
Kita ini baru angus mungkin. Kita angus mungkin. Habis mi dinamonya.
Ya naik.
Kalau di POI by 5 berarti nggak sampai 5 udah di-grade.
Tidak dong. Bateri ayah kasih bateri nah, bateri.
Enggak, ini yang punyanya ayah harus ambil. Nah khusus habis beda semua POI harus diterima beda.
Bukan explore dulu pengen ke kelas.
What do you mean? Starting the speech in 3, 2, 1. Notice that under both sides of the house, people are still going to be dying. You're still going to be subjected to these critical conditions. Rather, we believe then that it is going to be better under our side of the house if we are able to prove to you that at the end of the day, this first of all, that these kinds of essential workers are still going to be able to work at the end of the day, and second of all, that at the end of the day, they're still going to be provided with as much benefit as OG wanted to begin with. But several degree of contextualization, and notice that this is kinds of fundamental analysis that was missing on opening opposition side of the house, right? On fundamental level, notice that humans are inherently egoistic. That is to say that they're going to be benefit oriented. That is to say, if you do not have any money, if you do not have any connection towards powerful people, then you're going to be neglected to begin with, and you're going to be seen as nothing under their side of the house. First of all, this means that there is going to be a high likelihood of majority within the status quo. That is to say, the managers, the stakeholders, the politicians that are going to be providing these kinds of essential workers with as much agency as they can. For example, in terms of their wages, in terms of the PPEs that they're going to be wearing, to essentially see that at the end of the day, these kinds of potential workers are going to be nothing but worker bee for the institutions that they're going to be working in. That is to say that at the end of the day, they're going to be seen as bottom level workers. That is to say that there is going to be less inherent incentive for these kinds of stakeholders, for example, to essentially just try to engage with these kinds of workers and basically try to see what kinds of things that are going to be missing to begin with. But second, that this context basic and the heart of this context basically extends to the children of these people and the rest of society. Yes.
Okay, your side romanticized the case that there are many healthcare workers works without proper protection apparatus. Instead of focusing on how incompetent government in providing necessary protection, you're normalizing this health workers.
This is the substantive that I'm going to be trying to prove under our side of the house. But second contextualization and how this basically extends to the children of these people and how this basically creates a perpetuation of this kind of cycle, right? Notice then that at the end of the day, the parents, these kind of parents, let's say the parents that came from the middle class, the parents that basically came from higher position from these workers, are going to be telling that, for example, if these kinds of children do not necessarily do the study properly, they're going to be end up like these workers. Or if they are going to be naughty, then at the end of the day, the garbage men, for example, are going to be taking them away. Notice then that these kinds of people, since they are going to be they're supposed to be the ones that are going to be the ones that are going to be the closest to the children. These children are going to be internalizing within themselves, for example, that these workers to begin with are not going to be someone that they should engage with, and at the end of the day is going to be creating a perpetual cycle that at the end of the day is going to be creating a harmful condition towards these workers. Notice then that this is the idea that OG should engage with, that at the end of the day, because they basically provide us with no incentive or basically analysis on how then that at the end of the day, these kinds of stakeholders that are going to be beneficial to be towards these workers are going to be treating these workers better under the rest of the house. For example, if these workers somehow decided to basically get fired up, for example, that at the end of the day, these kinds of workers are still going to be working. Notice then that at the end of the day, since that they're going to be constantly telling them that these essential workers are going to be bad, they're going to be internalizing that this is going to be bad. Notice that this is the analysis on this is the prerequisite analysis of benefit that is missing on O, right? There is how then we're going to try to complete the benefit that was missing on O, and how that at the end of the day we're going to be creating a better suitable environment for these kinds of workers, and how we're going to be able to create a necessary environment for these workers to basically be living in. But second contextualization, and we believe that this one that was the one that was missing on OG and basically opening benches. Notice that most of these essential workers are going to be placed at the bottom of the ladder. This basically means that they're going to be enhanced their privilege to begin with. What am I talking about? Notice that in America, for example, American soldiers work as soldiers because that is going to be the easiest way for them to get into position where they can earn money with the limited education capabilities that they have been granted with. Notice then that at the end of the day, this kind of characterization will still exist on both benches, but at the end of the day, under our side of the house, right, at the very least, we're going to be creating a situation in which these people are still going to be appreciated to begin with, because people are going to be realizing, for example, that these kinds of the kind of works that these kinds of people are going to be working in are going to be dangerous, that these workers are going to be necessary for them to work in. What is this going to be creating essentially a narrative towards the majority of the society, where at the end of the day, they're going to be more appreciated towards the worker, for example. But on the comparative, what is going to be happening under government side of the house? Notice on what is going to be happening under the government in the house is that at the end of the day they're going to be letting go of these people, for example. First of all, even if they were not let go to begin with, then at the end of the day these kinds of people will still not be granted any sort of mechanism on how they're going to be, how the stakeholders within the society are still going to be thinking highly of them to begin with, because there is not going to be any way for them to basically be seen as someone that is essential. Second of all, if for example they chose to basically get out of the job in which they're going to be in, they're going to be digging themselves in a grave, for example. Why is this going to be necessary? Because at the end of the day, these kinds of people are inherently uneducated to begin with. There is going to be less option for them out there. For example, so this is how it is going to be better, right? If you're going to be creating a condition in which these people are going to be thrive better, we believe that there is going to be better on the rest of the house, because we're going to be providing a potential for these people with no alternative to begin with. But yes, OG.
They are already work before the crisis happened. So this is not changing the fact that they are not appreciated well. They are well appreciated more, but the government seems to neglect all that, right?
Okay, so here's how the benefit is going to be manifesting under our side of the house, right? Notice there's going to be more incentive for these people to essentially try to basically be appreciative towards these workers. Why is this going to be the case then? First of all, because you're basically going to be creating a narrative that they're going to be sacrificing themselves, people are going to be realizing that at the end of the day, these kinds of works are going to be dangerous to begin with. There is going to be incentive for them to essentially try to prevent these workers from dying as much as possible, because they're going to be realizing, for example, that if these workers die, then they're going to be either the one to take their place, or they're going to be the one facing the brunt damages of whatever critical condition that they're going to be in. In which case, this basically means, for example, if essential workers in medical fields die, then at the end of the day, people are going to start dying more, because at the end, there is not going to be anyone that is going to be taking care of the old, of the sick, and every single one that is going to be facing this kind of critical condition. This is how it is going to be better, right? What is going to be the weighing mechanism under our side of the house? OG proposes coercion. They want to just create a narrative for people to basically force these workers into submission. We will then there is going to be uncharitable. Why is this the case? Because it works on the best case scenario under the side of the house, wherein the government will basically try to agree as much as possible with these workers. First of all, they do not necessarily provide you with any analysis on why the government will basically be incentivized to begin with to essentially create a condition in which these workers are going to be comfortable in. And second of all, notice that under our side of the house, at the very least, there is going to be analysis on how, for example, the people that are going to be within this government, or people within the majority of the society that is going to be controlling this government to begin with, are going to believe that at the end of the day, these kinds of essential workers are going to be necessary, and as such, they're going to be trying as much as possible, for example, by giving donations, by especially pushing the government, for example, for a better living condition towards these workers. This is why they're not proud.
Itu terlaksana tuh. Administrasi ini buat dipakai. Dia harus lihat dia kita punya project di sini tuh.
Wih,
Ada internet juga nih di Surabaya.
Hah?
Internet juga mau.
udah kan ngetek sudah ada open.
Dia kayak tab asistennya yang urus Zoom sama bantu di kita.
Yang kayak wilayah kemarin.
Langsung minta langsung kepada
Tanya apa gimana caranya gitu. Kalau bisa ya aku pakai bisa langsung ambil guys. Kalau kom
Semangat.
saya masalah kalau bilang mau bikin apa bikin yang sensitif. Sudah mau motion roll 3-nya sensitif. Yang PDIP itu. Motion 2-nya sensitif jadi kerja motion 2.
Suka ke motion begitu. Saya suka motion.
Suka nggak name drop.
Tadi.
Iya itu.
Nanti dimarahin.
Ya sekarang name drop.
Mentang-mentang Ganjar Pranowo. Kalau langsung tai-taiin sama Jokowi, nggak begitu mainnya.
Saya kan Anies. Sama di akhir.
Saya kuat. Dari kanan.
Okay. CO goals, we want that, CG goals, that we want this kind of essential worker, they can working in their sector without thinking that, oh, I need to do this because the narrative that exists in the status quo. Like for example, that we want that this kind of essential worker just working by their own based on their tupoksian in some part of the same. But before that, I'm going to prove that why OO are failed in this debate. First,
speaker of the say that the one, for example, they working during the crisis condition, it will increasing the sympathy and empathy of the worker itself to the kind of the patient, and it could be part of the kind of happiness of the worker itself. But we say no, ladies and gentlemen, because it only will be happen in normal situation, ladies and gentlemen. In crisis situation, it could be a nightmare for the worker itself, because this essential worker, the moment they're up in this kind of situation, they are going to be something that going to danger themselves. Even if the moment, for example, they sympathize the sympathy feeling and something like that will occur in the opposition side of the house, it's going to turn out as something that really nightmare in the side of the house. In the end of the day, for example, in the doctor, they get infected by the COVID and so on so far. This is mean the moment, for example, those kind of people thinking that thinking that the narrative of sacrifice is really good in our side of the house is not going to be really good. So in our side, I'm going to explain to you that why. I'm going to explain to you why the moment, for example, this narrative of sacrifice still exists. It's going to giving mislead the information and mislead the narrative in the status quo. Let's see the OG argumentation. They are only giving an argument. They're trying to convince us that the moment, for example, when it comes to crisis condition, it is bad for those kind of essential workers to working to continue their duty, ladies and gentlemen. So we are going to explain to you why those kind of narrative sacrifices should be preempt. Not only for those kind of essential worker, but also for the society, ladies and gentlemen. So what will going to be happen the moment, for example, this kind of narrative still exists, ladies and gentlemen, for the non-essential worker or to the society as a whole, ladies and gentlemen. We can see the one, for example, the majority of the people or the society as a whole believe that the moment, for example, you are working as an army, you are working in an army sector, or you are working as a doctor, for example, it is really something that it is really bad. The moment, for example, a crisis situation happen, ladies and gentlemen. So what will be happen? It could be the parents of the children, for example, they don't want to allow their children to working as an army in the end of the day, or they want to allowing their children to working as a doctor in the end of the day. Because of why? Because in there is a crisis happen, means that this is a suicide job for them to working, ladies and gentlemen. So what the manifestation in the end of the day? In the end of the day, there will be imbalancing that happen in terms of job, ladies and gentlemen. For example, no one going to taking a job as a army, for example, or not going to take a job as a doctor anymore, and ladies and gentlemen, because this kind of narrative that still occur in the status quo, ladies and gentlemen, right? And second, why this narrative is not going to finish this kind of crisis, ladies and gentlemen? Because understanding that we think that the narrative, the sacrifice means that you have to doing a big thing without getting nothing, right? And this is something that it is really unjustified in the government side of the house, ladies and gentlemen. Because of what? Believing, imagine, for example, this kind of working, this kind of worker, they are doing something that they have to working, for example, and sacrificing their time, their energy, even like their self, for example. But in the end, they only get, for example, like, oh, you are a hero and so on and so forth. It is thing that we cannot take as a CG, ladies and gentlemen. So what will be happen for this kind of their essential worker itself, ladies and gentlemen? We think that what thing that will be happening, that those kind of workers, they are going to not working anymore, ladies and gentlemen. Because of what? Because they believe that this idea of the sacrifice is really bad for themselves, ladies and gentlemen. The moment, for example, they have to membahayakan dirinya. But let's see for those kind of non-essential worker, because here we only talking about the essential worker, that for example army, doctor and so on, so forth, really in the frontliner. But let's see for those kind of non-essential, like for example that person that working in the politics sector, the government sector, or even the finance sector, for example, what will happen for them, like, ladies and gentlemen? We think that they also take place in how they can support, or on how they can support the crisis thing, ladies and gentlemen. So in the end of the day, for example, we only giving the glorification about the narrative of sacrifice for the essential worker. Those non-essential workers will think that we don't have to opt in on this kind of crisis, ladies and gentlemen, because in the end the one who will get the credit is the essential worker itself, ladies and gentlemen. So that's why in the end of the day, those kind of non-essential workers, they don't want to, or they're refusing to helping those kind of crisis situation, ladies and gentlemen. In our side, we already proved to you that in terms of scale, in terms of credibility, we already proved that not only for those kind of essential workers that going to get the bad impact, like what the OG already explained, but also for the next generation, ladies and gentlemen, that also will going to get the impact. Like for example, the some children that going to pursuing the career as a doctor or as a army, for example, but they getting a refusal for their family because this kind of narrative or sacrifice exists. So with all of this kind of reason, we are ready to prove to.
Jadi second
Kita kau udah POI tadi ya? Kau udah POI tadi?
salah satu merah kisi dulu.
Oh.
Merah kisi dulu.
Ih, bagusnya juga nyanyi. Tapi jawaban politisnya ya.
Itu gimana?
Kenapa datanya tidak ada? Main manja. Butuh timer? Itu yang pakai lonceng.
Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. All the narratives that both government has tried to bring, all of that is never exclusive, either you were coerced or not, either in all kinds of situations, all of these workers has always been underappreciated by either public and the government. And so post-abolition has basically come in to break all of the deadlocks and all the framing that on our side we believe isn't much different in whatever is happening in the status quo right now. A couple comparisons towards opening opposition and why we see as classic we have so much better input towards this debate. We see that OO is missing the importance of this debate is the urgency of crisis. If we don't believe that the whole motivation to inspire others, it is not urgent at all in this case because everyone is trapped in this whole horrible thing, and you either have to choose, either you will try to do your best for society, you will try to do your best for your family. How much can you put in towards this whole thing that we are all trying to survive from? They talk about why these workers will be more appreciated, but in the talks of sacrifice, what matters the most is the exact narrative that these workers are their incentives on why they're doing it. My first speaker has to respond towards all the governments because OG has basically failed all the engagement and dismissed government's claims. The main contention of OG is basically they said about the coercion, right? And all that my first speaker has responded about is how much harmful towards all these workers in so many ways. Like in the metrics of like doctors, soldiers, or nurses, right? We believe that the medical workers and these military people are most likely aware that in the first place they are applying for this job, they are studying to become doctors, they are already consented to be in service. Like in military, like I'm in service for my country. Like doctors and nurses go through all of those hardships because they believe they will do better for society. They will help so many people, saving their lives. And all that we know, they know exactly what they're going into, and the exact thing they need in crisis is because they are pushed. Like they know this is the exact time for me to actually go there and do my job, and the exact sacrifice. We don't think that they are coerced to do this because they ultimately know this is what they're going into, and the whole overwork thing is the exact sacrifice that they know they will face one day. A couple of things towards that, like if you want to talk about the health workers, SEO has ultimately shown you the most important actors, right? At first, because the most vulnerable ones. I mean, essential workers cater so many sectors, and many that you might miss out, and not just supermarket cashiers, like the ones that are like ojek drivers, like package delivery guys. Everyone has to like get in and sacrifice themselves within all the risks. because not only like when the most we see that the ones that are the most like, let's say the one that are the most coerced, like, because sacrifice doesn't always mean all that romanticization. Sacrifice means like it's tiring, it's pain, like it's awful, like being put in a place, like importantly in such crisis where you will do anything to make money, like to save your family, your partners, your kids, and all parents. We concede that there are economic, like they have to do this for the economic rights, like the government said, but these people is exactly sacrificing themselves as individuals for the sake of everyone as well. Why? Because they are needed to, like these, this is why I see all, like my first speaker came in talking about the smaller ones, because these smaller people, this minority, understand exactly that the hardships that everyone is facing in crisis, they know exactly that all those hardships are multiplied upon them, because they don't have the capital to survive this, they don't have the more preparation that the ones that are in a higher, like have more capital, can survive this whole pandemic.
On that point.
Okay,
let's assume that both sides, the essential worker, are underappreciated, but our side, the incentive to change the profession from the government to improve the protection towards these individuals is better. Your side, the government, society is going to complacent, they don't want to change.
Okay, we get it. Actually, my first speaker has gone, but I will expand to that. Like, again, coming back to this first, like the hardships that they face are multiplied, right? Because they understand that these people are in a very hard place, and they understand that, so they have the initiative to still go to work, not just because they needed the money, but they know exactly that there are so many people that are suffering, not just their, especially their own people that need the economy to still go, to have people still buying their little snacks, to have their wages still getting paid by private sectors, and that is why we believe those are the exact sacrifices that they make aren't exclusive just for themselves and their family, but also to the society. My first speaker has fully provided you why exactly this narrative will move the government, right? Because this is what the whole thing OG and CG has worried so much about. When public follow this exact narrative, because when we mean public, we mean everyone, right? This is why we have to force this narrative, because the government will always be held accountable anyway. We don't think that just because the people, people realize that they will have more sympathy, let's say. Because you say that the government will not care about these. We say that no, because the more this narrative will be pushed, the more people will be more sympathized towards these essential workers. That means that this government will have no other choice but to be held more accountable, to put in better wages, let's say, also to private sectors, right? Like all the realization of the danger that all these essential workers will force them to protect, will push them to give them the better and the more fair treatments that these workers have been missing. Couple responses towards CG. All the blame that CG is afraid of, right, will be only worsened if their side, because public does not have the better sympathy and the better understanding that so many people, whatever they do, are still doing their best in these times. Like all the sacrifices, we don't think, we strictly say no that doing the big thing is for nothing. We say that you're missing the whole point that the frontliners and all essential workers will be prioritized. That is the exact one of the glorification that we want for them, because this will bring them the much benefit that they're missing this whole time and what they need in these times of crisis. In conclusion, Closing Opposition sees this narrative as something that we are very proud to push and keep in the society in times where they need it the most. Proud to.